Welcome to the Chuck Whitlock Show, What's the Matter?, where we invite experts to discuss important issues affecting your community, your family, and you. If it matters to you, it matters to us. Considered a leading authority on white-collar crime, investigative reporter Chuck Whitlock has written popular books such as Scam School, Metascams, Age Without Rage, and Police Heroes. He is also the recipient of national awards for his investigative journalism on television. You've seen him on Oprah, Extra, Inside Edition, The View, The Today Show, Hard Copy, and many other national television shows. Here's your host, Chuck Whitlock.
Hello everyone and welcome to What's the Matter? I'm Chuck Whitlock, and today we are going to explore what's the matter with divorce. We all know many of the common causes of divorce: infidelity, money, lack of communication, constant arguing, and lack of intimacy. Today we are going to talk with two professionals who deal with divorce on a daily basis, a divorce attorney and a marriage counselor. They will shed light on the current trends surrounding divorce. For example, how successful is marriage counseling in saving a deteriorating marriage? One legal expert reveals why what you say in counseling might come back to haunt you. We also want to examine the components of healthy and happy marriages and find out how some couples make marriages work. Certainly, there are problems with all marriages, but some couples seem to find a way to get past these problems and move on. All of this and more when we return from a quick commercial break. Welcome back to What's the Matter?, where we are discussing the topic of divorce. We have with us today Mark Williams, an attorney with Rice Family Law, who guides people through the divorce process. He's here to discuss what he sees in the divorce business day in and day out. Before we hear from our expert, let's hear some practical marriage advice in this short video we're going to roll.
My name's James Sexton. I'm a divorce trial lawyer in New York City. One thing most people don't think about when they're going through a divorce, but they should, is that divorce isn't a cure-all to the problems that they have in their life. When you're married, you have one set of problems, but you don't have another. And when you're divorced, you have one set of problems, but you don't have another. So basically, you're trading one set of problems for another set of problems. And at the end of the day, whether it's married or divorced, whether it's single or in a relationship, it's all about picking the set of problems that you feel most comfortable with. The best way for someone to move past a divorce is to start thinking about their post-divorce life from the beginning. When you think about why, you can endure the how. When you think about the destination you want to get to, you can navigate your way there. People who are going through a divorce very often think about nothing but the loss. But the truth is, there's also a lot of things you're going to gain when you get divorced. There's a freedom from a certain kind of upset that you had. There's a freedom from a certain stress that you had. There's different ways to interact with your children and different ways to interact with your home and your environment. So I try to get people, when they're in my office, to start thinking about the things that they're keeping and not the things that they're losing. Talking to your children about divorce is incredibly important, but my clients often want to do it way too soon. They want to talk to the kids about what's going on with mom and dad and that mom and dad are going to split up before there's any plan in place. The most natural question that children ask is, what's going to happen? When am I going to see mom? When am I going to see dad? Are we going to be living in the same house that we used to live in? How's the dog going to go back and forth? Kids ask all kinds of reasonable questions about the very specific things that are going to happen. So as much as you might want to share with your kids real early on that you are splitting up, until you have an answer to some of those really significant questions, don't do it. It's really easy to think that marriage is binary. If you're not perfect at it, you suck at it. To people who are newly married, the suggestion I would give is, remember why you feel the way you feel right now. There's a way you're behaving towards each other right now. There's a way you're looking at each other when you're newly married that changes over time because the world's antagonistic to marriage. The world doesn't do much to facilitate marriages and help them. It does a lot to beat the hell out of them. So one of the best things you can do is try to remember what connected you to your spouse and try to remind yourself and your spouse every day of what parts of them you fell in love with. They say marriage is hard, but it's only hard if you think paying attention is hard.
Mark Williams, you're a divorce attorney. You've been practicing for 13 years.
That's correct.
Tell me about this. Help me navigate through this whole divorce thing. Two things that I know. A heavy percentage, over 50% of marriages end in divorce. So it's something that every one of us needs to be aware of. What's your advice to folks that want to get a divorce, particularly those that are older?
We're seeing a lot more older people getting divorces than we used to see. We're seeing a lot of younger people not getting married. And under any of those situations, communication is absolutely key. Prenup is generally a good idea, in my opinion, before you get married, regardless of age. And a prenup doesn't just have to be about money. For example, you could contractually agree to certain things that may help maintain the marriage. Like if we get in a bad patch, we agree to go to marriage counseling. When I first meet with someone who is interested in getting a divorce, I usually try to determine if they're a victim of domestic violence or if there's drug use or some reason that I would advise them to get out and get out quickly for their safety. But if those issues aren't there, I strongly recommend they go to marriage counseling and see if they can save their marriage. Mm-hmm. Now that's up to them. Court can't make them do it.
Sure.
But if they're convinced that they're done with the marriage, then we start focusing on what they need to do to exit that marriage.
Let's assume for a moment that I'm contemplating divorce and I share that with my wife and she empties the bank accounts, takes all the assets and disappears. Is there any hope of getting some of those assets back? I mean, she has a right to take the assets. She owns them just like I do.
It largely depends on where those assets came from, what type of assets there are. I'm dealing with a case right now where there's significant cash in a safety deposit box. How do you prove it? And once it's gone, it's gone.
Yes.
So, and I have another case that involves gold and silver. How do you prove it? Once it's gone, it's gone. But if we're talking about 401ks, if we're talking about CDs, some of those are difficult to cash in and you can probably get them back.
Divorce court is a court of equity, is my understanding. What does that mean exactly? How fair a shake am I going to get when I go through divorce court? Are there any assurances, any guidelines that I should know about?
With respect to issues like custody, certainly that's equitable because the court's trying to make the best decision for those children. Mm-hmm. In terms of what you can expect, you can generally expect to split half of everything that you acquired during the marriage. I've got clients who will get $1 million inheritance. And then they buy a house and title it in their name and their spouse's name. And what they've done is they've taken money that was their separate money and gifted it to the marriage. And so now it's marital property. But if they had maintained it as their separate property, there are ways to keep it as their separate property forever. The reality is most people don't think through this. They're in love, they want to help their spouse, and they do it out of kindness or goodness. But when things go south and they're in a divorce, suddenly that's my money, I want it back. Mm-hmm. But they didn't act in a way where they can get it back all the time.
Let me ask you before we go to break, this topic, we could be here forever. Let me ask you about alimony. My wife makes more money than I do, for example. Can I try to get alimony in the divorce? Is the person that makes the most money compelled to pay alimony to the person that's making less money?
To get alimony, you have to be a dependent spouse, and the other spouse has to be a supporting spouse. And the general look at that first is who makes more. But if she makes $5,000 more a year, then probably not. If she makes double your income, yeah, you've probably got a case for alimony. The difference matters.
All right, folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back. And when we come back, we're going to talk to a counselor about how not to worry about divorce, how to keep a good, solid relationship going. Welcome back to What's the Matter, where we just heard from divorce attorney Mark Williams about the good, the bad, and the ugly aspects of divorce. Now with us is a marriage counselor who helps couples get their relationships back on track. Please welcome Jessica Moorman of Horizon Wellness Services. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you.
Glad to have you with us.
I'm glad to be here.
So you are a marriage counselor. You help people that need to mend the fences and make their marriage work better.
Yes.
Tell me about the process. What are some of the issues people are knocking on your door to get answers to?
The top 3 things couples fight about typically are money, kids, and sex.
Money, kids, and sex.
Yes. But a lot of times it's communication issues, conflict resolution, lack of connection.
What are 5 things that you would suggest to somebody coming to you to make a relationship work better?
5 things. Let's see. Learn how to show appreciation to one another. Learn to communicate more effectively, take down the defenses, and learn to clarify with one another and find out what you really mean. Probably learning how to fight, avoiding the pitfalls of fighting, and fighting fair with one another so that you actually solve things and you don't just get mad.
You know what I found, Jessica?
What's that?
Anytime I've been in an argument with my wife where we're raising our voice, which isn't very often, but when it does happen, I feel like the conversation has so degraded that nothing positive can possibly come from this. The minute you start yelling at each other, you're kind of at a point where you need to separate, I would think.
Yes, most of the time.
I don't mean permanently, I mean for the moment.
Or regroup, yes, because a lot of times then you end up fighting about the fight instead of fighting about the context of the issue.
I heard something once, Jessica. Listen to this. I like myself best when I'm with you. And I often thought, what a wonderful thing one human being can say to another.
Absolutely.
You make me feel good about myself. And isn't that somebody that you'd like to spend your life with?
Absolutely.
So that means, I would think, reinforcement, acknowledgement for the strengths. Mm-hmm. I would think that the most successful marriages that I've seen, those that have lasted 40, 50, 60 years, are marriages where there's a lot of give and take, yes, a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy for each other. And the marriages that failed, those things were absent.
I think expectation is a big part of it too. I think unfortunately people have unrealistic expectations regarding marriage, and they think that it's going to be happiness and joy and passion and appreciation all of the time. And it's just not. We all have bad days.
So what happens with a marriage when sex is gone out of the marriage? I mean, is there any way to recover from that?
Yes.
You mentioned sex.
Right. I think a lot of times sex is a symptom of an issue. Mm-hmm. So whether it's just not feeling appreciated by one another or not feeling connected in any sort of way. Sometimes, of course, there's biological issues surrounding sex or scheduling issues surrounding sex.
Sure.
But I think a lot of times sex is kind of a snapshot of how our relationship is going. It kind of displays how our connection is with one another.
That's an interesting comment. So when there is a negative disruption in that part of your marriage, there's probably an underlying reason.
Right. Most of the time.
And that's what you try to identify as an expert and work on.
Yes.
You don't work on the sexual problem, the financial problem, the arguing problem. You work on what's causing those things.
Right. Usually with couples, I start by, let's figure out how to connect better to
Right.
one another.
Right.
And then let's figure out how to talk to one another, and then we can start talking about things. Generally, anybody who leaves feeling more connected, which happens a lot, I have a lot of couples that say, oh, we like each other again. We're enjoying each other. We're going on dates. We're spending time together. We're talking. I think that's always the best. It makes me so happy for people.
Thank you, Jesse. for your unique perspective and passion for helping other people live happy, healthy lives. All right, we're back with Mark and Jesse, divorce attorney, marriage counselor. I have a question. There is an issue about, well, somebody comes to you and you think they need marriage counseling. What's one of the cautions that you're going to offer?
Well, particularly if it's a client who tells me that they've had an affair, I may tell them not to share that information in marriage counseling, because if those records are obtained and used in court, it could hurt my client. In my opinion, a subpoena signed by an attorney is valid to get the records and to get depositions. I've even had a mental health counselor potentially facing contempt for non-compliance. HIPAA is very easy to override, in my view. And we tell clients, be careful what you say, because your doctor, your mental health counselor will tell you it's all confidential. And it is to the world, but not in litigation.
That's really important to know. All right, listen, we've spent some time talking about this whole subject of divorce. And, you know, I was telling Mark earlier, Jesse, it's over 50% of Americans end up in divorce. Mm-hmm. So it's a topic that I know at least half of our viewers are really interested in. How do we bring all of this home? What's the key takeaway from you, Jesse? You had a relationship. We know that there's a 50-50 chance of it succeeding or failing. What's your best advice?
I think my best advice is to have realistic expectations and to try until trying is no longer healthy for you.
Realistic expectations. Don't expect too much from this relationship.
Well, no, I think in the age of social media, I think unfortunately we see I say this to clients all the time, we see everybody's highlight reel and we see our behind the scenes. And so we see anniversary posts, we see happy relationships, we see family outings, and we don't see arguments, and we don't see difficulties, and we don't see financial stress. And so it's hard to recognize that other people also have these things, and that's not their everyday life.
Okay, don't have unreasonable expectations.
Right.
And work through your problems.
Yes.
If possible.
If possible.
But when not possible, call Mark Williams. And Mark, what is the viewer's takeaway from our discussion?
Well, I totally agree with Jesse. Setting expectations is important. I would say do it through a prenup. If the marriage goes south, then trying to get people in the room to talk like adults and work it out without litigation or without contentious litigation is better for them and better for the children. Because if you go into court and you call the other spouse all these horrible names, they're going to remember that forever. The relationship is far more ruined. So we prefer that, but if they can't do it, we're here to fight.
Well, listen, you guys have been very helpful. Thank you so much for coming on the Chuck Whitlock Show. It's really been delightful having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Enjoyed
Mark
it.
And Jesse, thank you so much. Marriage counseling certainly is one approach that has proven to be successful in helping to rekindle a dying marriage. But unfortunately, counseling does not always repair the damage that has been done. When a couple makes the final decision to end their marriage, seeking out attorneys who are caring and knowledgeable and who believe that cooperation and communication between both parties to traverse through the divorce process is their best hope for beginning the next step of rebuilding their lives. Thanks for joining us on What's the Matter. Please know that your concerns are our concerns. We would like to hear from you. If there are any issues that matter to you that you would like to see addressed on this program, please contact me with your concerns by emailing chuck@chuckwhitlock.com. Because if it matters to you, it matters to us. I'm Chuck Whitlock. See you next time.